Hi, I'm Kathrine Despote Belmonte. I lead a program of work on human rights and gender equality related to the environment at the UN Environment Program World Conservation Monitoring Center, UNEP-WCMC for short.
Why does gender matter at COP16 and in UN conventions that are about biodiversity?
Yeah, that's a good question, and basically that's the question that I think emerges in the process of the CBD. And it did, of course, at COP15. I think governments, stakeholders, right holders acknowledge that gender equality is important to address the environmental challenges that we face. But at COP15, I think parties realize that the solutions to environmental problems, including biodiversity loss, require long-term and sustainable solutions. And for that, the perspectives of women and men, and those that identify as such, need to be visible and available. And one of the issues is that, well, there are three core issues that relate to gender equality in the context of the CBD. Access to participation and decision making, which is unequal for women and men. Access to resources, including land, which is unequal for women and men. And access to the benefits derived from biodiversity and use. And obviously, these are the three objectives they relate to the three objectives of the convention: the conservation, sustainable use, and access and benefit sharing. It has been acknowledged in the CBD process that gender is a cross-cutting issue. But the problem with a cross-cutting issue is that it's meant to be addressed everywhere, and in the end, what happens in practice is that it's not addressed anywhere. So with the adoption of Target 23, with a focus on gender equality through the gender-responsive implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, parties agreed that there are steps that are needed to ensure that the implementation of this framework follows a gender-responsive approach. By gender-responsive approach, we mean that it responds to the needs of women and men. And for that, an inclusive process, providing the spaces for women and men to have equal access to the decision-making table, equal access and opportunities for the sustainable use of resources, and equal access to the benefits derived from biodiversity use. And fortunately, Target 23 was adopted, so this provides an entry point in alignment with the Gender Plan of Action that was also adopted at COP15. They provide the framework that countries can use to progress gender equality in the context of biodiversity at the national level.
So, thank you. I'm curious about, so it's been 2 years now, and I think it's very spot on what you said about if it's cross-sectional, then it doesn't go anywhere. So what do you see as something that can be done to ensure that these are the Gender Plan of Action and Target 23 are actually implemented? And maybe connected to that, is there something in the wider way that women are perceived, like in the kind of like almost like the mindset of decision makers and people who influence decision makers? Like what needs to change in how they value women?
I think the issue is precisely that women tend to be invisible. Obviously, there's a lot of research and evidence that showcase the contributions from women in terms of their knowledge in specific fields. So, evidence from UN Women, publications from the CBD Secretariat, publications from FIO and related entities, they show that because of social constructions on gender, there are specific roles and responsibilities that women and men play. This includes in rural environments. And given their roles and responsibilities, there's specific knowledge that is developed and practices. And what we know is that the role of women and their contributions and spaces to contribute with this knowledge is limited. The key thing relates to the domestic commitments that tend to be delegated to women. So I think all over the world, women are seen as the primary caretakers of their homes. On top of that, they also play a productive role in terms of livelihoods and supporting the well-being of their families. But in terms of the context of implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, those two commitments that I noted, Target 23 and the adopted Gender Plan of Action. For those that are not familiar, the Gender Plan of Action has two expected outcomes of what we hope to see in terms of implementation, what we would like to see by 2030 that has been achieved. So it's organized under three outcomes. There are specific objectives that they need to be met, and there are 18 actions that are targeted to governments that they need to implement at the national level. And this relates to the core issues that I mentioned, participation, decision making, access to resources, benefit sharing, but also addressing data and knowledge gaps. So the Gender Plan of Action provides guidance on what steps can be taken by governments to ensure the gender responsive implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So it addresses the core elements of Target 23, the gender equality target. In terms of the ways to do this, UNEP-WCMC, in collaboration with Women for Biodiversity, the CBD Women Caucus, we supported parties in the co-development of a methodology. This is an indicator on the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action. So what the indicator aims to do is provide a measure to understand if countries that are parties to the CBD are actually implementing the Gender Plan of Action, and they are taking actions to progress towards the achievement of Target 23. Through the process of co-development, what emerged from discussions with parties that supported the co-development, we worked with 19 countries. They told us that it's super useful to have an indicator and measure to see if there's progress towards Target 23. But the most important part that emerged from those discussions is that this indicator also became a tool and a reminder of the commitments that they had made in the Gender Plan of Action, and have an honest assessment of progress towards these different actions to help them to, first of all, see the level of progress on the different actions, identify the gaps, help them planning and coordinating with the relevant entities to progress towards the implementation of these actions. In terms of coordination, it became obvious that in terms of gender equality in the context of biodiversity, there needs to be better coordination among the relevant government departments, for example, government departments and ministries. So the Ministry of Environment, Agriculture, Fisheries, Ministry of Women Affairs, but also with civil society, with women's associations and organizations that are working on the field directly relevant to biodiversity, to take an approach that helps to address the challenges that women and men face on the ground. So the core feedback that we receive from parties is that apart from having a measure, an indicator to report on progress towards Target 23, this is going to be a useful tool to start implementing those actions at the national level. And hopefully, if those actions are taken at the national level, there's going to be progress towards Target 23, and hopefully this target is achieved by 2030.
And I guess I'm curious about what are some of the wishes you have for this COP and some of the outcomes, because you're involved in the negotiations.
I follow the negotiations.
You follow the negotiations. Thanks. That's definitely a bit different. So, yeah, is there anything in particular where you feel like there is going to need to be concerted effort to really push in terms of gender advocacy?
Well, one of the key things that is going to be discussed is they're trying to finalize the monitoring framework. This is the indicator framework with the measures to monitor progress towards the goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. At COP15, an indicator on the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action was included in this monitoring framework, but it lacked a methodology. So countries weren't using it because, if there's not a methodology, there is no indicator. What is going to be discussed at this COP is which indicators remain in the monitoring framework, and this indicator is now available. So our ask would be for parties to have a look at this indicator, use it, and even if they don't want to use it in their national reports as a measure of progress, because the indicator tells you it's on the scale of, it's a percentage from 0 to 100%, 0 meaning no implementation whatsoever on the implementation of the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action, to 100% that the Plan of Action has been fully implemented. If they don't want to use it as an indicator to measure progress towards Target 23, use it as a tool to enhance coordination among the relevant ministries, assess the actual measures that countries are taking at the national level to ensure the gender responsive implementation of the Gender Plan of Action. So this indicator provides in an easy way a reminder of the commitments, of the actions, and help them think and assess the level of progress towards each one of these actions, and plan and monitor progress towards the 3 expected outcomes that are meant to be achieved by 2030, outlined in the Gender Plan of Action. So the ask is, have a look at the indicator, it's available now, and use it.
Sounds pretty simple. And maybe one final question from my side would be, what do you think is the role that finance and business can play as an ally in that whole area? Because there is a lot of participation from those stakeholders here.
That's a really good question. And I mentioned the Gender Plan of Action has 18 actions that are targeted at parties. There are other actions that are targeted at different stakeholders, including the private sector. There are 2 actions that relate to the private sector that are included in the Gender Plan of Action that are meant to be driven by the private sector. This relates mostly to I think they relate mostly on trade and value chains and measures that businesses that are working on these areas can take towards ensuring a gender responsive approach. But as you know, the private sector also can provide make commitments and contributions to the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So it's a great opportunity for them to showcase what steps are they taking in their own organization and the work that they deliver related to the environment on ensuring gender responsive approach. Are they taking into account gender equality in their advisory boards, in the steering committees, in ensuring gender balance in the number of employees? taking measures in the consultations that they hear the voices and make visible the voices of women and men. So it's a great opportunity to showcase what is the role that they are taking to ensure the gender responsive implementation of the GBF, because definitely they can play a role there.
Thank you.